Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to do a global day 1 tier list for Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade, and as you can see right here I have separated the units with the ones that will be available day 1 and the ones that will come in the future, aka they are available currently in the Japanese version but of course won't be immediately out for global. Allow me to also quickly explain my tiers. The double S tier, we will have the best units in the game, essentially the strongest ones or the meta ones, if you will. For the S tier, we are going to have more amazing units that are very valuable to own, they just did not quite cut it for the double S tier. For the A tier, good units that might get power crept sooner or later, but they can definitely be helpful, especially early on in the game's life cycle. Then for B tier, units that are more niche, they can be situationally good, and yes, they can work, but they are not the best of the best, and the ones you should definitely focus and invest your resources into. And finally, the C tier, the not so great units will be placed here, and I mainly made this to also discuss about some of the rare characters, the silver ones. I would also like to honorably mention Jogo and Hanami. They are both SSR characters. I have them in the not available yet tier, because I'm not sure if they will be out day 1 for global. If I'm not mistaken, for the Japanese version of the game, these two were kind of rewards from events with specific tokens that you needed to grind a lot to get. So even if they are available day 1, they won't be obtainable very easily early on. But if I was to place them somewhere, they would float around S and A tier. But let's now get to the characters we for sure know will be available day 1, and let's begin our tier list with the rare characters. Yuji, Megumi and Kugisaki will be given for free. They will also help you go through the tutorial of the game at the start. As you can understand, these are all C tier characters. Megumi is more utility based, the other two single target damage dealers. Maki I will place over the free ones. She's not that great either though, still C tier, but with one of her skills she will be able to do damage to multiple enemies at once, which is nice. Panda I will place A tier for sure, a good character to start your account with, because he is a tank and helps with survivability a lot, so he reduces the damage he receives and also attracts enemy attacks to himself, which in combination with the damage reduction can of course allow him to absorb multiple hits and allow the rest of your characters to be safe and take care of the enemies. Inumaki will be placed S tier. He's a very useful rare character actually. He's kind of tricky to use because every single one of his skills sacrifices a specific amount of his HP. He can't die from that though, have it in mind. But for a rare, he has very strong utility. From one skill, he can reduce all upcoming damage to all allies for 2 turns, and he can fill all allies' ultimate goals for a specific amount, which is very good. With another skill, he has 95% chance to stun one enemy and can also apply some damage with his ultimate, but you are not really going to use him for his damage, mainly for his supporting ability, which for a rare especially is awesome, and I really love this character. Next we have Ijichi, and this is another utility rare character. I will place him B tier, and the main reason for that is that I think he is way more situational than Inumaki and Panda. He can definitely find uses, especially if one of your main damage dealers dishes out taijutsu damage, but if you don't have one of those, then he loses a part of his kit, and he can still help a lot with his ultimate to reduce allies' ultimate skill goes by a specific amount, and also he can provide damage reduction to the team. But I still think that you might go with Inumaki instead of him, except if you are using taijutsu damage, and even if you specifically want his damage reduction and you don't have Inumaki or you don't want to use him, you can go with Panda instead. Still a good character for a rare, just more situational than the ones above him, but in the right situation, surrounded by the right units, he might even be better than them. Saki is one of the two new characters in Phantom Parade specifically. She is another rare damage dealer, probably even the best amongst them. I will place her C tier of course, I don't think she's that amazing. Early on she can help you with some basic quests, but not a unit generally you want to heavily invest into. Overall, for your damage dealer you would definitely prefer investing into SSR units, and for your supports you can use lower rarities, but I think because she can also help her damage herself without necessarily depending on support, she's top of C. And for the final rare character, Kaito Yuki, the second new specific Phantom Parade character, I will place him A tier over Panda. I think he's one of the best rare characters on release for the game. He can reduce damage for a specific character though, not everyone. Then he can help with cursed energy regeneration to unleash more skills, which is very good. And with his ultimate, he can boost Jujutsu damage for 3 turns. And even though, just like Ijichi, he boosts a specific type of damage in Jujutsu, other than the fact that it is a better boost because it is coming from an ultimate and for more turns, it also targets characters that are some of the best DPS characters in the game and deal out Jujutsu damage from their abilities and specifically their ultimate abilities, so that has to be taken into consideration as well. And the cursed energy regeneration is also very good. And let's now get to the SR characters, starting things off with SR Todo, placed in the B tier. Other than the break damage niche that rare Megumi also has, nothing super special with this character. Just like we discussed with Saki, he can actually boost his own damage. He applies taijutsu damage, obviously increases his own break damage through multiple skills, and he is a single target DPS, even with his ultimate. Next up we have Nishimiya. I will place her in the S tier, but even though she's a higher character rarity in SSR than Inumaki, who is rare, I will place her behind Inumaki. I think that she's good, simple support, but Inumaki can probably find higher value earlier. But her ability to also boost all types of damage for 2 turns is awesome, 100%. She also has survivability in her kit, because with every single one of her abilities almost, she gains evasion for 1 turn, which means she cannot be hit, and she can keep helping your team deal damage, which is awesome. She can stun enemies and even apply Jujutsu damage to all enemies with her ultimate, which is pretty nice coming from a support. She also has a passive skill where at the start of every wave she can apply increased damage taken to a specific enemy, but it is random. But it is something random, I wouldn't say the best thing in the world to depend on, but it's an added bonus, so we'll definitely take it. It is also worthy to note that her stuns are not 100% guaranteed, but even without them, especially early on in the game, she's a good damage booster. Next up we have Mai. I will place her in the B tier. She is a damage dealer, not an amazing one. She has similarities with Todo. I will place her behind Todo. And right now I have to admit the B tier has good synergy to even make a team, because the damage dealers do taijutsu damage, then our support can help that damage. And the difference between Mai and Todo mainly is that Mai has a high probability of stunning a single enemy. She is also single target, she also does taijutsu damage and can boost her own damage for 3 turns. She can also conceal herself, which is unique to Mai, and she can work with break status. She does more damage if an enemy has break status applied to them. If you noticed, I said she can have a very good chance of stunning the enemy. That is a buff the unit actually got in Japan. She was not initially like that, her probability of stunning was very low. So it really depends on which version of Mai we are going to get in global. If we get the pre-buff version, just use someone else, to be honest. If we get the buffed version, I would still probably max another DPS, but she's just a bit more usable as a unit. Very cool artwork though, I have to admit that. Moving on to Mechamaru though, this is another damage dealer, but the unique part about him is that he can deal Jujutsu damage to all enemies with one of his skills and his ultimate. He actually makes a good combination with rare Kaito Yuki we saw before, because he boosts Jujutsu damage but overall the unit is like an upgrade to Rare Maki. He's not that great, he almost has no utility in his kit, I can't really place him over B tier. If Mai gets her buff day 1 on global, he is under Mai in the tier list. If she doesn't, he is over Mai, but just to be safe I will place him at the bottom of B tier. Early on he can help you with some easy quests, but not really a unit to invest a lot of resources into. Next up we have SSR Miwa, who I will place at the top of A tier. She is an upgrade in a way to Rare Panda. She is a tank, she is a survivability unit, but can also work as a sub DPS in a way. The reason for that is the unique mechanics she has. So with one of her skills, she gets evasion status, attracts all enemies to attack her, and then increases her own taijutsu damage, all for 2 turns. With another skill, she gets counter status, which means that when she is targeted for an attack, she deals a specific amount of the overall damage she took back to the enemy. And with her ultimate, she attacks a specific selected enemy, but does both taijutsu and jujutsu damage to that enemy, making her a unit that can be the front line of your defenses and absorb hits, dish them back, completely evade them, and even do damage on her own. Do not just expect her to replace your main damage dealer though, you still need someone else to carry the offensive load, and Miwa with her survivability can also help with some extra damage, not take over and be the main damage dealer. We have SSR Nanami next, and I will place him in the S tier for sure. I think for now at the bottom. He can go over Nishimiya, I guess it depends on what content you want to clear and how exactly you are going to structure your team. But this Nanami is essentially a support damage booster and a secondary damage dealer for your team. He is not going to replace your main DPS, so you still need the main damage dealer. But Nanami, first of all, is SR, so he's on the free-to-play friendly side and he can provide value to a lot of teams early on, especially if you're a free-to-play player, because he has a key part in his kit where with one skill he can increase his own damage for 4 turns and at the same time all allied damage for 4 turns as well, and he can further increase all allied damage from his ultimate. And on top of that, of course, he's not just a support, he can deal taijutsu and jujutsu damage with multiple skills in his kit. I definitely think he will be one of the characters we are going to see used by a lot of players once the global adaptation of the game comes out. SR Shoko is up next, and of course she's a supportive character. I will place her in the A tier, over Panda, but still under Rare Kaito. One of the best healers in the game, the classic healer unit we get in the early state of a lot of gacha games. She can also pair up well with characters that attract enemy attacks, and getting hit is benefiting their kit in some way, because Shoko can keep them alive. She overall can help the survivability of all of your units, but she is primarily a single target healer, so have that in mind. Pretty straightforward unit I think, and pretty straightforward role for Shoko. Next we have SR Yaga, the first character that I will place in the double S tier. The best support in the game essentially early on, and his value carries over in the later stages of the game too. He's simply awesome, he can provide a lot of value to your team. With one of his skills, he increases both taijutsu and jujutsu damage for all allies and 4 turns, which is very good. With his other skill, he can apply both jujutsu and taijutsu damage, and the thing is that he can also increase damage taken to a specific enemy for 2 turns, and that is another unique way in his kit to increase overall damage other than straight up boosting it. And he can even do the same through his ultimate, some damage again, and then increase the selected enemy's damage received. Have in mind, you can select one specific enemy with one of his skills to increase damage taken, and then another one with his ultimate to apply increased damage taken to that one too. Overall, we are talking about a strong support that is easy to use and be plug and play in multiple different teams with multiple different main damage dealers. His versatility is also another reason why he's top tier, and a character you would definitely be happy to get early in the game. From the double S tier now we are going to go back down to the top of C tier with the SR version of Noritoshi Kamo. He's primarily a damage dealer, doesn't really have a lot of utility outside of a stun, which can be helpful, but his damaging abilities are essentially applying multiple hits on a single target, which if you do need, he might be helpful, but outside of that, because he also cannot really boost his own damage like other damage dealers we have seen on this list can, and also because of the fact that his ultimate randomly targets an enemy, I can't really put him higher, he is not a great unit. And talking about not so great units, we have SR Junpei next, who I will place at the top of C tier now, overtaking Kamo. He tries to be a damage dealer, he does have some unique stuff like poison application, and he can also apply some unique debuffs to enemies, but this seems to be a character with whom you need to do more to achieve less than what you can with other damage dealers. So for example, you can apply poison, then increase his damage with 2 different skills, and then use his ultimate, which can of course do the main portion of damage in his kit, especially to poisoned enemies, but the damage output overall might still be less than what it would be with better characters. If you do need his continuous poison for something, that can be helpful, but overall I wouldn't really invest into this character to be one of my main damage dealers. Next up we are going to talk about the SR version of Kaito Yuki. He is also a supportive character just like the rare version, and I will place him in the S tier. He should probably go over Nanami but under Nishimiya. It is debatable, to be honest, depending on content. All of these 3 characters can be interchangeable, they are all good characters as well, but Kaito is a great support. He can actually decrease all Jujutsu damage received, so if you are going versus enemies that apply this kind of damage, he can be huge help. But with his other skill, he can grant attack nullification to a selected ally and then increase their Jujutsu damage as well. So as you can understand, he is centered around Jujutsu damage. He decreases it, increases it with the other skill, and applies it through his ultimate. And of course, through his ultimate he can also stun an enemy, which is a very high probability stun, something that makes it very good. A very interesting part about his kit is also his normal skill, for which you do not need to spend cursed energy in order to use. And when you attack a selected enemy, you also decrease that enemy's damage by a specific amount. And as an added bonus, especially for no cursed energy, that is definitely a win for this character. Finally, for the SR rarity, we have Saki Rindo, the other newcomer into the series. I will place here at the bottom of B tier. I was between B and C tier, but I think she is definitely better than some of the characters in C tier, so B tier it is, but she's still not that great. At least in my opinion, and the reason I'm saying that is because she technically wants to be low on HP for her ultimate to do maximum damage, and to achieve that, she attracts all enemy attacks to her, without having any way to actually reduce damage. She can also fill her own ultimate goals, which is very nice, and increase her own damage, right? So we could say she's a damage dealer through and through, but she also tries to be a tank without really having a survivability aspect in her kit outside of her being able to decrease the own damage received by 10% with her passive, which means that you need to essentially team build around this unit that seems to be asking too much in my opinion, and she needs to be the main focus of the team, because if you want maximum damage, she needs to be low, but then she needs to survive because she also attracts all enemy attacks. You need a healer, maybe someone to provide damage reduction, which might be counterproductive to what she actually wants, low HP for more damage. You need to manage the HP in a way where you can still achieve decent damage and keep her alive, so the unit might be too much of a hassle to use at the end of the day. Let's get into the SSR characters though, the best characters in the game based on rarity. The first one will be the protagonist of the series, Itadori Yuji, who I will definitely place in the S tier. I think I will place him bottom of S tier, and I will explain why. He is a straightforward damage dealing character. As the protagonist of the series, it happens with a lot of gacha games, either One Piece gacha games, Dragon Ball gacha games, etc., where some of the main characters get more simple and straightforward units, especially at the start, so you don't really need to have intricate understanding of the game or specific mechanics or anything to just play your protagonist. Yuji is exactly that. He's a damage dealer, he deals taijutsu damage, quite a lot of it, and he's very straightforward. He can increase his own critical hit rate, black flash rate, and fill his own ultimate skill goes for a specific amount, which is also pretty good amount. And then he just deals damage. He's a single target damage dealer. And am I mentioning all of those things because they are bad? Is it bad that he's straightforward? Not necessarily. He's like the perfect character to start the game out and start understanding the game with. But in these types of games, supportive and utility characters tend to have more longevity than straightforward / beginner friendly damage dealing characters like Yuji, which means he will get power crept and most likely outdated faster than some of the support characters over him. Let me once again emphasize though, all these things do not make him bad. He is still a very good game lance DPS, and if you don't have other SSR characters that are better DPSs than him, like let's say Gojo, spoiler alert, then Yuji for your account specifically might even be double S tier. He will be your go-to guy to deal damage. And moving on to the next SSR, we have Megumi. Pretty weird and niche character centered around the whole break damage thing, just like SR Todo. The thing with Megumi is that you need to invest more resources into him than Todo because he's a rarity up, and I will place him top of B tier. He is way better than Todo, and he's definitely still usable, especially early on in the game's life cycle, if you are a huge Megumi fan, and cannot wait for the next Megumi SSR that will actually be very good. We don't know when that will arrive though. This one specifically because he is centered around break damage. He gets outdated pretty fast as we get more and more character releases. And is probably not the best, not probably, he's definitely not the best SSR to invest a lot of resources into at the start of the game. He did get a buff in the Japanese version, but we do not know if we are going to get the buffed or non-buffed version when Global officially launches. We have to wait and find out, but even with his buff, he does not all of a sudden become an amazing unit. The exact thing we discussed with Yuji before applies to Megumi a bit more because the break damage niche is not great. He is a damage dealing character and he actually has a specific mechanic where you can call forward his divine dog by using his ultimate, and then 2 out of his 3 skills get extra abilities. All of them are also centered around break damage, and except break damage, Megumi can also apply Jujutsu damage, and with one of his skills, Max Elephant, he can also deal Jujutsu damage to all enemies, which is pretty good. SSR Kugisaki is up next, and this will be the second character I will place in the double S tier. She is a main DPS and a very good one at that. She has a very interesting design with a very specific mechanic. She can apply nail count to the enemies, and she can do that with her normal skill without wasting any cursed energy, which is a big plus for this unit. Essentially, nail count helps her do even more damage. The higher the enemy's nail count, the more damage Kugisaki will do. She can also increase her own damage with her second skill for 4 turns, which is very good. With her third skill, she just deals Jujutsu damage, which is actually higher the lower Kugisaki's HP bar is. I'm not the biggest fan of that mechanic, but we can't have everything. And then we have her very strong ultimate. She increases the enemy's nail count by 3, on top of the existing nail count. So if you apply nails on them with her skill 1, then you can increase them by 3 with her ultimate. She does a lot of jujutsu damage. The higher the nail count, the more the damage, and then from the enemy hit from the ultimate, she's a single target DPS, the nail count is completely removed and you have to start over if you want to achieve maximum damage. The whole idea behind this character is to build up the nail count of the enemy and then attack them with a big hit to do as much damage as possible. Of course, this is another character that actually got an adjustment and a buff, because early on she was mainly focused around nail count. Then after the buff, she also got extra damage based on if she got a critical hit or not, and she can increase her chance for a critical hit with her passive ability. We don't know which version we are going to get on Global's release, but still this is a very strong character and a very strong main DPS to start your account with. This unit's abilities perfectly resemble Kugisaki and I am definitely a big fan of that. Next we have SSR Maki. I will place her right below SSR Megumi. She's not a horrible unit. She primarily deals taijutsu damage, she is a main DPS, and she can actually, with her skill 3, apply damage to all enemies, which is nice, but it's from only one skill. Every other ability makes her a single target DPS, and from her ultimate she can also apply multiple hits to a selected enemy, specifically 2. But to be completely honest, this character is simply a worse version of Yuji, the SSR character we talked about before. There is no reason really to use her over Yuji if we're talking about meta and who is better. But if you're a big Maki fan and you really like the character, feel free to use her, no one can stop you. But I'm pretty sure at some point a better Maki DPS will come out in this game. So let's continue with the next SSR character, which is going to be Inumaki. Weirdly enough, I will place the SSR version of him lower than his R counterpart. I will place him in the A tier. I think somewhere here is nice for him. He is a DPS character with a lot of his abilities, he can apply damage, but he also has some supportive values to him, which is definitely nice. So first of all, he maintains the mechanic that his rare character also has, that he sacrifices a percentage of his HP every time he uses specific skills. But with this one he has inbuilt survivability, because with his skill 3 he can heal himself for a specific amount, helping him to manipulate his HP easier and stay healthy. Also something to keep in mind is that he can apply increased damage taken to the enemy with his skill 2 while also doing jujutsu damage. He does also increase his own break damage with skill 2, but he is not a unit that primarily focuses on break damage like Megumi or SR Todo, hence why I also have him a tier higher. And he also has 2 passive abilities. With one of them, it is a 20% chance that at the end of its turn, he can actually heal 10% of his own HP, which is another factor alongside his skill 3 that can help with his HP manipulation and survivability, so he can properly use his abilities. Now, the other skill is pretty interesting. At the start of the battle, he can nullify one fatal attack to himself or an ally, which is guaranteed to happen, but only once, so he can save someone, essentially, which is actually pretty good. But if we think about it, the ability might not even be helpful in a plethora of situations if we have built a team with a tank, a healer, or generally someone to help us with survivability. But at the end of the day, it is a fail-safe in case we don't manipulate our Inumaki HP properly and he's about to lose. Definitely an added bonus, even if it's not helpful 100% of the time. And while he can actually do decent amounts of Jujutsu damage, especially with his ultimate, he does not have a skill that can provide him with a damage boost in his kit like other DPS SSR characters do and are tiers above him. For example, Yuji and Kugisaki so far. Let's proceed to SSR Panda. I think I will place this character right behind SSR Inumaki. Decent character, nothing crazy, but also some interesting mechanics. So essentially when you activate his ultimate, he activates Gorilla Mode, and that immediately increases his own damage and unlocks a new part in all of his skills, also focused on damage. Before the transformation into Gorilla Mode, he attracts enemies to attack him, reducing damage, similarly to Rare Panda. But then, after in Gorilla Mode, he is focused more on damage, he's in Berserk Mode, let's say, and wants to do as much damage as possible. We're talking about Taijutsu damage, by the way, and he also has some break damage in his kit, especially increased when in Gorilla Mode, and just like Inumaki, he has two passive abilities available. One reduces 10% of incoming damage to him, and the other one grants him revival status. One time, of course. So, when he loses for the first time, he can be revived, and you can resume from exactly where you left off in the quest. Which is pretty okay, just like Inumaki, it won't be useful all of the time, just two nice added bonuses to this character. SSR Todo is next. I will definitely place him at the top of A tier. This character is kind of a hybrid damage dealer and support. Works well with Taijutsu damage and, to be honest, works very well with SSR Yuji. It makes absolute sense at the end of the day. He can increase his own but also an ally's Taijutsu damage for 3 turns. That's why with Yuji they work very well, or in general with characters like Maki or Taijutsu focused damage dealers. He can grant best friend status to an ally with his skill 2, and after that both his skill 2 and ultimate get extra abilities when best friend status is active. He gains access to the possibility of confusing the enemy for 3 turns and then also counter-attacking. On top of that, with his ultimate, he can increase the ally's critical hit rate by 20%. Yuji already has critical rate increase in his kit, and generally he can work with critical hit rate very well, so that is why they are a very good combination with each other. Todo also deals Taijutsu damage to the enemies, and through his skill 3, without best friend status being active, he has a probability of applying confusion, but at a much lower percentage. The character of course has his limitations, and without Yuji he definitely loses out on value. He is situational. At the end of the day you need to have a Taijutsu damage dealer to pair him up with, but with Yuji, great combination to start your account with, that is for sure. So if you have plans to actually use Yuji as your main DPS, pairing him up with this Todo is definitely a very good idea. Next we have a character I'm sure everybody wants to know about, SSR Gojo. Well, obviously he would be one of the strongest characters in the game, it is Gojo at the end of the day, so he will be placed as the best character on this tier list at the double S tier. This character is very strong, he is a main DPS, and he has some very interesting passive abilities as well. Let's begin with those. So first of all, at the start of the battle he grants attack immunity to himself. No one can attack Gojo, which is pretty broken, but there is a caveat. If there is a guaranteed hit inside the domain expansion, he can actually take damage, so he is not absolutely immune to everything, keep that in mind. He's still immune to a lot of things though, to a lot of attacks. And with his second passive, he leaves the field in 7 turns. So if you haven't cleared the quest in 7 turns, he's gone. His skills cannot be used anymore, he cannot absorb hits, he just leaves you with the rest of your team to fend for themselves. You need to clear the quest in 7 turns, otherwise Gojo is no more. But with that into consideration, how is he still the best DPS in the game? Well, first of all, you can combine him with a secondary damage dealer. To be honest, he simply does very good damage. With skill 1, he applies single target Jujutsu damage. With skill 2, single target Taijutsu damage, so he even has that versatility in his kit. Then with skill 3, he can increase his own damage for 3 turns by a very good amount. And to top it all off, he does massive Jujutsu damage from his ultimate to all enemies. Not just to one selected enemy, everyone on the field. Which is very strong, obviously, and another reason he leaves after 7 turns. And obviously keep in mind that you are not just going to have him alone on a team, you are going to use him alongside other damage dealers and supports, so you are going to have other ways to increase his damage, not only his skill 3. Meaning you will have even more ways to make his attacks stronger before he leaves. Of course, if you are not a fan of Gojo or his 7 turn limit, you can use other DPS characters. It's not like Gojo is the end all be all in Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade, you can use other main DPSs. But numbers do not lie, his damage output is the best, especially on release. And for the final character to be ranked in this tier list, we have SSR Nanami. He is kind of the opposite of Gojo. So Gojo wants you to be certain you can clear in 7 turns, otherwise you are going to use someone else. Well, Nanami becomes stronger at the start of turn 9. So stalling and taking your time is definitely not a problem with Nanami. It's not like he's useless before turn 9, but you can use him at his maximum potential turn 9 onwards. Because of that, and if we take into consideration playstyle preferences, you might want to put him lower on the list. I think for now, especially for the pre-release tier list, I will place him on top of A tier. He's not a bad character, that is for sure. He can deal combined Taijutsu and Jujutsu damage. He has the ability to increase his own critical hit rate. Generally, he does work with black flashes and critical hit rate similarly to Yuji, but he can deal 2 types of damage. And on top of that, with his ultimate, not only does he do combined damage, he also deals it to all enemies, which is a big plus for early Phantom Parade. And maybe as a disadvantage, we can also say that he might depend a bit too much on getting a critical hit or a black flash hit for maximum damage. As far as early DPS characters go, he's like the middle class, right? There are definitely better options. As we can see, there are definitely worse options as well. But as we go further into the game's life cycle, we are definitely going to see this Nanami drop off. That is a fact. While I'm not the biggest fan of this character, I think I can understand his appeal. And that concludes the tier list. That is everyone for the global version of Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade ranked. Big disclaimer, obviously this is my pre-release opinion. It might definitely change after the official release of the game. We will see how things exactly go and we can revisit this tier list and update it, of course. Maybe I have overestimated or perhaps underestimated some specific characters. Do you think so? If you do, tell me in the comments down below, and generally share your thoughts on the tier list and maybe a specific character. I would be very interested to read your opinions. If you enjoyed the video, definitely leave a like, I would really appreciate that, and you would be letting me know you want to see more in the future. Let me know in the comments as well. Subscribe for more Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade content, and as always, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.